Hi and welcome to yet another Tech Talk with Roland Hoffman. He's the Product Marketing Director at Steinway Lingdorf. Welcome, Roland.
Thanks.
In the previous episode, we talked about analog versus digital application. We kind of continue on the topic. Digital amplifiers and Class D amplifiers sounded kind of harsh at first. Am I right? And now what changed?
Yeah, many people have this in the back of their mind that Class D amplifiers, digital amplifiers sound harsh or lean or analytical and all these things. And I think we have to turn back the time a little bit to understand that and ask how and why were Class D amplifiers, switching amplifiers, invented or created in the first place. And the sad truth is that Class D amplifiers were not created in the first place for better sound. So sometimes progress is not what you wish for. Class D amplifiers, switching amplifiers are way more energy efficient. So the sad truth is that they were created for saving energy, for being more efficient, because you couldn't have analog amplification in a mobile device, in a computer, in a portable player, in a smartphone. It's impossible. You cannot have all these heat-generating Class A, Class AB technology in there. So there was a need to have a much more efficient amplifier principle, and that was the switching amplifier. And that later also then leaked into AV receivers, like integrated ones, because it was not impossible but very inconvenient to have 5 or 7 channels with Class AB or let alone Class A. That would be like heaters. And you couldn't have that with 7 or 5 or later 9 channels. It was not the way forward. So then you also had these Class D amplifiers, the early ones, in these AV receivers. Again, that was not necessarily to make make an amplifier that outperforms the best Class A or AB amplifiers. It was not designed for that, full stop. The first product that really changed that was the TAC Lingdorf Millennium. That was an amplifier that was the first digital amplifier out there in the late 90s, so way back. But that was not primarily made for energy saving, for making an efficient amplifier, but Peter Lingdorf and his team created this amplifier to make a benchmark amplifier, period. And the way to reach that was, okay, let's keep it in the digital domain as long as possible. Let's have this new technology to turn digital and amplify it in a way. And let's have a Class D related switching principle and torque power supply and so on, and a very, very audiophile grade output filter. All these things together, but not necessarily for energy saving or energy consumption, but to make a milestone amplifier. But again, not many, I would even say no Class D amplifier back then and for the years later had that in mind. So Class A, B amplifiers are very mature. They're really good. Even nowadays, you could say it's nothing wrong with them. They don't audibly distort or do anything fundamentally wrong.
Yeah.
We could, of course, measure what they're not good at, and that will never change. But the first Class D amplifiers were not really on par with the best Class A, AB amps out there.
Yeah.
And even today, you will find really good, outstanding, traditional common amplifiers, and you can find not so good sounding Class D amplifiers, even though the technology in principle is better and has also refined and matured. But you still find both in both leagues or principles. So that is a little bit the background about why the first Class D amplifiers didn't really perform and didn't really convince listeners out there, and let alone audiophiles and people who really have the most refined system at home. They didn't like Class D amplifiers for many years. I would even say longer than 10 years. I think there are only 3 or 4 amplifiers out there that really were game changers. And that was the Lingdorf Millennium. That was the NAD M2, a digital amplifier. Of course, the Hypex Class D, amplifiers, and now they purify. And these were really game changers, but they were also developed and created not only for energy, efficiency, but to make the best amplifier out there. And that's a big difference. And so that is not the same as saving energy.
Okay. So does this mean that in the long run or in the long term that Class A and Class AB will disappear?
I think it will always be a niche because they have a certain sound and a certain sound coloration to it, which some people like, and that's with a certain cartridge of a turntable, and that has a sound character and that sounds different than this cartridge, and they are also, preferred by some listeners. So I think they will survive in a niche, but as you can hear over the last 4 or 5 years, Class D amplifiers really are now outperforming many conventional amps out there.
No.
But it took that long time. It didn't happen at first, with a few exceptions. And but nowadays, I think you can find outstanding Class D amplifiers. Not only the Purify, I think they are really set the benchmark now. But you can find many others which are definitely way better than Class D amplifiers 10 years ago. So I can only try to convince people to listen to a Class D amplifier again, even though when they have it in the back of the mind that, yeah, I listened to it, it sounded a bit harsh, it sounded lean, or it sounded analytical or whatever. I think now, 2024, you have to erase that. It's a new era of Class D amplifiers, and you can really hear that.
Well, you talked about 4 benchmark amplifiers. I owned and listened to a Tech Millennium. That was the first real big effort, game changer, like you told us. And then I also owned and listened to an M2.
Right.
That was the next stage, that even more control, more power, more resolution. And jumping now to Purify, yeah, they really made an effort to really get those THD numbers down. So there is almost no audible distortion, and this makes the sound that you hear, what's in the name, Purify, so pure. You get, I think the evolution is you get closer and closer and closer and closer to the music and to the musical intent, and in that way, well, let's applaud for the efforts and for digital amplification.
Yeah, you're right. It's easy to think that an amplifier that sounds musical and getting distortion down by 0.000% are two different things.
Yeah.
Also because many people think it takes some kind of magical components and magical resistors or components to get that musical sound. No, in the end, it's reducing all these side effects and different kind of distortion that gets you closer to a musical sound. And that's where these later Class D amps get better and better and better, and now probably reach a really good turning point in time, because the distortion is so low. You hear, you have more musicality, and you can see that in the for example Lingdorf MXA 8400 reviews, that suddenly reviewers use the word musicality in it, which 10 years back you wouldn't find in any Class D amplifiers. Like, that sounds very accurate, and you try to explain what is good, and but you never read that it's musical or anything. And now you do, and that has to do with reducing distortion, but also never losing focus on you have to get the sound performance right and not only minimize distortion. Or in other words, you have to do the right things to remove the distortion and take it lower. And that has often to do with the signal path and the output stage. And that also matured a lot, the output stage of Class D amplifiers. You can make it very cheap. You can make it really advanced and high-end, like in the Millennium, for example. So it's more refined circuitry as such, combined with a lot of learnings and a lot of improvements, and getting the distortion down and down and down to a degree that it's not there anymore. And then suddenly this musicality shines again or returns, and that was what the other amplifiers were always good at, even though they always had some degree of distortion.
Yeah, we made a giant leap forward. If you like visualize, the Millennium was a very potent, big amplifier.
Yeah, and it was not
And
empty inside. Even
yeah,
though it was a Class D
yeah,
principal and digital amplifier, you could think, "Oh, that must be half empty." No, it was packed with technology.
yeah.
And
And look at the purifier. It's a lunchbox.
yes, yeah. So that, of course, is. I mean, the Millennium is also now over 20 years
Yeah,
ago. But again, you look inside, and many things were done as a proper, as you would do it with a proper high-end audio amplifier. So bringing the best things together, like the principal difference and advantage of Class D and digital, together with the best of how you design a good, powerful amplifier. And that's what the Millennium did, and a few other products. And many, to come back to the original question, many Class D amplifiers didn't do the second part of it. They took the technical advantage of having a low energy consumption circuit, Class D switching amplifier, but didn't care so much about, what this product is made for. Listen to music, listen to sound, listen to movie soundtracks. So efficiency is only one thing.
yeah. Let's talk about design. Like what Peter Lingdorf did with the Millennium is like what Tesla and Elon Musk did to cars. The knob, the big turning wheel in the middle, it's become iconic for Lingdorf.
Yes,
It's still an every amplifier, the big turning knob. It
Yeah,
was
we still have it in different sizes
Yeah.
in our components and even in our app. The main reason behind that is, of course, that this thinking of that you have something tactile, that you have a great volume control. But the deeper reason is actually that the volume leveling in a Millennium is very different, and also in our today TDI 3400, for example. When you change the volume, when you turn the volume wheel up and down in the TDI amplifier and in the Millennium, you don't really change the incoming music signal. You don't attenuate the incoming music signal, not in the analog domain, not in the digital domain, as every conventional amplifier does. There you take a already quite weak music signal coming in and you attenuate it further and then you amplify it.
Yeah.
The Millennium is completely different. When you turn the volume wheel, you basically set the output voltage of the power, of the output power,
yeah.
of the power amplifier. And that, of course, that's okay. If that volume control is so special, we better show it. And so the big volume wheel is fascinating to use, but it has a deeper meaning because you basically turn the amplifier, the power amp, up and down. And that is another reason why this amplifier or a TDI sounds different than other amplifiers.
A switching amplifier or a Class D amplifier, Roland, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, many people are confused not only by the letter D, which is just a letter in time when the switching amplifier was created, and also wonder about the switching amplifier. What is switching? And if we move away from audio amplifiers, a good analogy is to look at light bulbs and LED lights. So if you remember the good old light bulb with that wire that heated up in the middle, that is basically analog. There's current going through and the thing lights up and it gets pretty hot. There's a lot of waste of energy. And that is analog and not very efficient. It gets so hot that you cannot even touch it. So it's a lot of waste. And if you compare it to an LED, an LED lamp is actually switching. It is switching so fast that you cannot see the switching. And half of the time it's actually off. And there's also no wire and that degrades over time. So it's a good analogy. And this switching has to be done in the right way. And maybe you remember the first generation of LED lamps. They had terrible colors. And they were, even if you look at the side, you see them flickering and all these things. They were not good. And so the analogy also goes back to audio amplifiers and Class D amplifiers. They were not really mature in the beginning. They were more energy saving, but they didn't give a good light and they were flickering, and they were buzzing, and they had all kind of things. They were better in some ways, but not in all. It was not a better light bulb. It was just more energy efficient. So when we move back to amplifier, almost the same thing happens. A Class D amplifier is switching. It's switching very, very fast, but you have to do many more things right to end up with a good amplifier. Otherwise, you will have a bad LED light.
Yeah. So a switching amplifier, Roland, does that mean that he constantly switches on and off, like your analogy with the LED lights?
Actually, yes, it does so, but you will never really hear it or notice that because it's done at an extremely high frequency.
Oh, wow.
Way above the audio band that you're listening. So that can range for example, in the TDI around 400K, so 400,000 hertz, and in other designs it can be up to 800,000 hertz. So that's way, 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 way above anything even close to audio. So that's why it's in a safe distance, but still you have to kind of filter that away so it doesn't find any way back to the audio processing, and that you can do in different quality levels. And that's what I'm saying with this energy. You can have a good or bad implementation of the LED light principle. That's why they also cost different. And you can do the same with a Class D audio amplifier design. You can, even though you have this high frequency, switching frequency, you can still design the whole unit in a high, medium, or low quality, even though it's not a better or worse switching frequency as such, but the overall design still matters. How well it really keeps all this switching away and not interfere with the audio signal.
Well, you talked about LED and traditional light bulbs. Is it kind of the same thing as when we watch a movie in a cinema or watch television? It actually are like 25, 50, 100 frames that are projected in 1 second. There are stills, but we perceive it then as moving picture.
Yeah, that's another analogy that you can take, that you have to do that right so you don't see it and the picture actually gets better. So you have to really have high processing power to turn this principal advantage into a better picture quality. Maybe also another analogy is these first LCD screens. You know, when we had these old school televisions still with the old technology, and then we have the first LED and flat panels. They were also energy efficient. They didn't generate much heat, but how were the colors like? I mean, the lipstick was too red, and the grass was too green, and the sky was too blue. It was not better. It was better in some ways, but every technology needs to, get better and better and better. And only now they kicked out all other technologies with OLED and QLED and what have you.
Yeah.
But it took that time to get there.
It needs to evolve, mature.
It needs to evolve.
Yep.
You have to put technology in it. The principal difference itself only gives you some advantage, not necessarily better colors or better resolution or better whatever. And the same is with audio gear. A principal difference is not enough. You have to do many things right, no matter in the analog or digital domain.
Yeah, so if you think that digital amplifiers and Class D amplifiers still sound very harsh, well, then listen again. That's our message of today in this Tech Talk. If you like our Tech Talks, then please subscribe to this channel, to the Best of High-End channel on YouTube, to watch even more of this stuff.